Hi there, Randy Green here, podcast 2 in the understanding of what we call methods of interpretation of mythology, and as researchers and how we work with this very weird zone of information that is difficult to find evidence for, because it's kind of, let me put it this way. Science has for a long time, at least that was how it was when I grew up, kind of sold themselves off to have the answers. And fortunately today, and especially with the new group of scientists and the ones that are kind of cross-sectional, they are also working with other sections of information, such as historians that are working with biology, or you are having physicists that are working with biology, or this kind of way you have different angles on sciences and you put them together and you begin to create this system of thought instead of just being localized within your field, which is one of the things that we have seen in the last 200 years of science. They are very rigidly within their own field of expertise, and by that are only focusing from that level of understanding, which of course is good when you're building the field. But once you have gotten to the field where you have exhausted the field of sciences and theories and exploration journeys into that approach of reality, you then discover, okay, now I need to go from the locality into the system that this local area of expertise is part of. And that's where we are heading today. That's one of the new things I'm seeing that is happening within humanity. We're getting more and more fueled by the understanding of things work in systems of chaos or systems of order, and then begin to work with that interpretation. The weather system is a really good example of that. We still have people on different places on the planet and within different science communities and non-scientific communities that think that they could do weather modification in their little local area and it will not affect the rest of the globe. Whereas those who actually work with the weather system as a large system around the globe, fueled by the ionosphere, different movements of what we call the El Nino, the jet stream and the Gulf Stream, and whatever all of these fancy streams are called, our understanding this is moving the clouds, the weather system around the planet as a unity, as a wholeness. So when we are having, for instance, I watched a documentary of How to Kill a Cloud, about an experiment that were done by some of the United Emirates, isn't that called UAE, United Arabic Emirates, sorry about that, that put together a group of scientists from around the world in Abu Dhabi and were trying to find ways to seed clouds, which we know already began back in 1946, actually in America. And we had this whole kind of Operation Popeye in Vietnam in, what was it, 1964, I can't remember. As I said, I don't have a recall memory. I have a process memory. You can look it up, Operation Popeye, where they use silver iodine to literally into the clouds. They were seeding it into the clouds, which led to 3 months of extra monsoon rain and floods and mud slides and what have you. So the military, the American military, already tested that as a weapon, and we have this whole kind of what is it that the program, I don't know if it's still running, but the US military actually made a program that where they're going to control the weather in 2025. Look it up on the internet. You can look all of that information up and you will see, yeah, there are weather modifications been going on since the 40s. We already have cloud seeding. Just look up weather modification or seeding over clouds and you will see there are companies that are actually selling it. So, and I want to put that in here, just putting it in here because that's one of my old things. I worked with that years ago and I came up with the same arguments back then Because when I look at the chemtrailing on the sky and these kind of things, there are different chemtrails, there are different properties and different ways that they're working. But I think we can all agree on, we can always say, well, it's because the amount of methane and CO2 is now so high in the atmosphere, the clouds lingers on, that they spread and become this dimming effect. And it has nothing to do with weather modification. But we could also turn it around saying, yeah, we do know, as Richard Dolan has talked about the breakaway civilizations, we do know there are groups within the human population that are already far ahead in different types of sciences and are already putting it into the world, as in Elon Musk and his 60 satellites he's blasting up into the ionosphere to create internet up there or what have you. So we are now having more pollution up there, that junk up there in the ionosphere that is already there. Just how did he get the allowances to do so? Who's controlling that? Is that controlled by the government? Probably not. So we are having these private contractors, as I talked about 15 years ago or something, that they are going to run the world, and they are already running the world. So who says we don't have some kind of secret company that's already trying to modify the weather, already doing that? There was this project in the UAE that was going on, and they are seriously doing that without being part of the convention of 46 countries that have kind of agreed to not use weather modification as a weapon. But that is already in a hostile way. But trying to alter and they said this typical one where you have this for the greater good of humanity. Always, you take whatever science you have, put that one in, and people will say, oh yeah, we'll go for that one. Yes, let's create cyborgs for the greater good of humanity. Let's make all transhuman for the greater good of humanity. Sorry, joking a little bit, but that's how you have these crazy scientists that are going to put things in they know that are immoral. They know they're on the brink of actually tampering with a very complex system. Nobody really understands how it works. And then they just put in for the greater sake or for the greater good of humanity. And then it's kind of, okay, yeah, screw all the rules and all responsibility and who cares? Let's do the science because it's for the greater good of humanity, right? Male argument. Sorry for saying so, but it is. That's kind of where you take the typical male way of working of, yes, this is fucking interesting, and not really putting in the frontal lobe responsibility, consequence thinking, as in, okay, let me turn down the testosterone a little bit, being a little bit less cocky, and think a little bit more about the consequences of what I'm actually doing. And that's run by the testosterone, by the way. So that is an electrochemical feature of males that prevents them from putting things up into the frontal lobe and think things through before they just jump into it and just go along with some kind of idea that perhaps should have been thought through a little bit better and thought into a system, and taking the responsibility of, okay, if I do that, then what are the consequences? Not just few years ahead, but long range, the responsibility and consequences long term. So just to put that one in, yes, I'm a feminist. Yes, I like to kick men in the balls and tell them that they need to think a little bit more about things before they do it. But just look at the reign of under the males that have been on this planet for so long and where we are now. So I think it's kind of okay that we begin to place a responsibility where it should be placed. And at the same time, get women, kick them in the butt and say, grow up, take responsibility, do a little bit of education, educate yourself to take positions within our society where you actually will have a voice and where you will be heard, not because you are premenstrual or whatever, that they will put in arguments that are scientifically based, that are based upon intelligence principles and arguments, and work in a manner that is not too over emotional, even though that it's ridiculous that we get that one shut down in our shoes, as we say it in Danish all the time. But the point being here, as when that's also to be taken in, because We are talking about this kind of hierarchy of opinions and sciences and meanings and paradigms and what is okay to investigate and how we're going to put this and what is fringe and outlandish and what is accepted and what is gender biased, as in kind of if you have a male that would work with the higher order psychogenetic method, he would probably at some point get accredited for, oh yeah, that's a good way of thinking. Whereas now I'm kind of, as a woman doing it, I'll probably be called all sorts of nasty things, which is why I don't have comments on my YouTube videos, because there are trolls out there and they are not just artificial algorithms or AI. They are also living in physical male forms most of the time, and they are nasty and they say nasty thing, and that is another thing I really feel that we as a society have not lifted the task of really figuring out why are there males that are so enormously hostile and that thrives from killing women, raping women, annoying women, and pushing women into the mud. Why are they still there? And that's where I want to put in with the Greta Thunberg, aside from her different way of thinking and different way of being, which we have seen actually has led to a complete people movement where she has started a lot of work for her generation, which is what these hybrid kids are supposed to do. So she's really living up to her new engineering, to put it that way, which we also should put into the discussion. She's really working well with what she's supposed to do, but that's because she works in a completely different way. And I saw that documentary of her and how she responds, and that's just a very, very focused human that is, which brain works in a different way. And I'm trying very, very hard not to say something here which I would love to say, but I don't feel is my place, because she's still in play and she's doing her very best. And she is a new example of a new type of human that are working for causes that will change the world. She's engineered to change the world. That's why she's so focused and so oriented towards what she's doing. And there's not much room for anything else. These are some of the traits of the hybrid kids that are going to change our world. They have that engineering, and that's what it takes to change the world. Seriously. So I don't see her as a person with Asperger. I see her as a new type of human. Okay. But there I was just looking something up on the internet, on the Wikipedia, on all places. There was this kind of, I was interested in because she crossed the Atlantic in a boat, and it took her 2 weeks. And that was not mentioned in the documentary. So I looked it up, and there I just fell across something. I can't remember what the company was called, and it's fine because I don't want to anyways slander them, whatever, but it's on Wikipedia. And, they had made a sticker where you see a man raping a 15-year-old girl with braids from behind and then putting the name Greta on it. And I just, how is it even possible that a company in the 22nd century are making such a sticker, get it mass produced and put out there? A company, I could understand was some kind of one person or whatever, but a company, and still think that that's okay. Raping a 15-year-old girl from behind as a way of slandering her as a climate activist. That, for me, that is so puzzling that it's even possible. The steps, the processes of going from having that as a perverted, stupid male idea, as a kind of a jackass idea, right? That's a jackass idea. From that level, and then put it into print and put it out there, and then not take responsibility until later, and then just give an excuse where they should have been jailed. They should have been fined. There was just kind of they apologized later. Seriously, it crosses so many moral barriers that it's incredible. And I have kind of read the speechless, right? Because that's when I think about there are humans out there that are actually allowing that to happen as part of a company, and they think it's okay. As I can't even, how is that even possible? So that also, when we put it into this whole kind of, okay, we had Enki and Enlil and Inurzak that created the humans as slaves. What went wrong, right? You go from that idea into a company that's creating a sticker, raping a 15-year-old girl from behind. Seriously. Okay. So just go into that line of thought. And I wouldn't be, sorry. That's just one of the things that pisses me off. That's the Me Too movement here. Let me just put that Me Too movement in here, because I'm a woman and I'm a feminist, and this is about time where someone really begins to investigate male behavior, what's okay and what's not okay, and then really begin to work with it as part of school system, educational systems, scientific systems, the hierarchy of thought of males, the way that they have led our world to what it has become, and the absence of female that have taken responsibility, because that's the other side of the coin. Why are female not taking responsibility? And then you will say in the Me Too movement, because of sexual harassment, because of such a thing as that sticker, because of the way that we are being approached, the way we're being diminished, the way we're being slandered, and all this kind of things. And yeah, that is enormously uncomfortable. That is so enormously uncomfortable. Okay. So we are having an issue here when we talk about, okay, let us try and change the world, which goes into my changemaker material. We are also dealing with, there are many different types of humans here. And I think that's the more interesting question, as in kind of getting all hooked up on one theory of thought where we kind of get too focused on, yes, Enki comes in and says, or that Orion character comes in and says, oh yeah, I'm going to restore the Adama blueprint. That's only one lineage. We have got 12 other lineages originally, and that's not the lineage of the original human blueprint. And the whole idea of this, again, using human naivety to come in and get a say, etc., etc. We need the discussion on a whole different level. That was just the beginning. That's the baby step where we believe what these aliens are telling us. We need to take it to the next step, scientific method here. And that is when we do the higher order psychic energetic method, which I'm working on and trying to figure out to create in a way. And I already begun the process of it in the transition science courses, where I work with 6 different layers of the brain and how it processes information, how we can work with the electrochemical processes of the brain according to the transformative energy system, how we in our energy work and in our clearing work and in our meditative, contemplative work are able to change our energy system, to ignite the layers of our neural network that can work beyond the frequency spectrum and into the density energies, which are based upon holographic principles. So this is again where we begin to say, okay, let's just do clean table and all of that. We are very grateful for von Däniken and Sitkin and all of these that began to push the paradigm of sciences and began to create ideas for the broader collection of humanity that had the ability to think in an intelligent way and put together information. But those of us who are now outside, first and foremost, we need to school ourselves a little bit in scientific method. We need to school ourselves a little bit in how to do actual research. We need to understand the context of information and how all information is created within a context of culture, of different abilities, of different levels of knowledge and different types of sciences and different types of paradigms and what is accepted and what is not. And we need to understand what's the purpose of that information and why is it created. And it's not just good-hearted people that sit down and create something. Everyone is doing something because they have an agenda, whether that agenda is local or global or systemic or cosmic or religious or scientific or whatever it is. Everybody's working from their frames of references. They are working from their inner narrative of who they think they are in that global community we call our planet. And we see ourselves as either the personal narrative or connected to others and the society we are part of. And this is the problem with quite a lot of people within this level of work. They are very local, service to self, so to speak. They're oriented towards their own little navel, their own little perspective, and what they want to put out there, whether it is to kind of, here I want to do a little bit of psychotherapy, because why are we invested in these narratives? Why are we investigating these things? Personally, I am investigating it because of all the visions I had, because of the encounters I had, because of the attacks I have had. That put me down a different trajectory. If, for instance, we're talking about that, as I talked about in the first podcast, with the first vision of that Orion, Hunter, Sirian, or whatever, which there are quite a lot of them on our planet. So it's not a coincidence that I'm able to recognize that kind of robe and that, because I kind of had my own experience of probably not the same entity, but same kind of robe. And we know some of these races have these robes. And we had, for instance, within the six-dimensional fallen Minotaurians or mammal-based civilizations that used to be part of our system. There are not many of them left. Most of them are in the underworld now. But they used to have different robes. We're seeing that symbolized within the robe of the priest, the robe of the king, etc., etc. It's a kind of the way the aliens or the extraterrestrials have behaved and what they have shown has been mirrored by humans. We know that for many reasons and purposes. We'll just leave it at that. But what I want to put in here with the psychotherapy is, why do we create these stories? So the point was, I got that interest, aside from being different, thinking different, and had my own version of a childhood, whatever that is, we all have, that forms who we are, that creates the structural layers in our brain, that creates how we process information, and is based upon our experiences as kids, the way we are assimilated into society, or the way we are not assimilated very well into society. And I was observing society. I was in a way assimilated, but not completely, because I had all of these different levels of my inner world that I knew was different, and therefore I kept to myself. And sometimes I was not when I went to school, I was tired because I'd been awake most of the night, because I had to protect myself from that dark creature beside my bed, etc., etc. And I had some really nasty dreams that also woke me up with night terrors and onward and so forth. So therefore I was not on my highest when I went to school. And even though I did get quite okay grades I got throughout school, my brain just works differently. It's not a recall brain, it's a process brain. So I saw processes, whereas what we was taught in school were linear information. And I don't work in linear information. I'm pretty sure if I was a kid today, I would get some kind of weird diagnosis, right? So anyways, just to put that in context. And it has taken me years to be able to work in a way where I could find my footing, because I was trying to fold myself into society as it was, the way that science worked with information. And I had to, going to the university was one of the best things I ever done, but it's one of the worst things I have ever experienced, so to speak, because it was horrible to constantly being reminded of how different I was. And I had some good experiences there as well, kind, caring people. But whenever I was in contact with tutors or professors or whatever, it was always this looking at, now she's asking her ridiculous questions again, because I was not using the scientific method. And that was also shown in my assignments and the papers I provided and almost so forth, which was the same in school. You know, I've talked about that before. I always had these very interesting discussions with the professors or what have you, and then went to the exam where you have to do things in a specific way. And then I was just kind of getting too nervous. I'm not an exam person. So, yeah, all that cleverness that go down the drain as I was adrenaline kicked in and my whole system went into the limbic, lower levels of the limbic system, removing all of the processes from the higher levels of the brain and down to the instinctual level, just trying to get through that scenario. And then at the same time being highly clairvoyant and also experiencing kind of energetic attacks from whatever was going on. A little bit complex situation to be in. So that's kind of my personal personal experience with the whole society, having had this high level job, high profile job, and still being a clairvoyant and dealing with these kind of things. Because as a kid, I never really shared that other level of me. I kept it as a secret. So I grew up with this 90% of me hiding it away, and then 10% being out there. The rest of it was working with something else in some other level. And that's where you can say, well, with Greta, she has her own inner universe. She has her own way of seeing things. She works with things in her own way. And I'm kind of not saying I'm the same as her, because I'm not. We're all different. But the idea, the dynamics of being so focused on something that is so dissimilar that we have to invent our own way of doing it, that I can say that's the same, because I had it the same way. I'm this kind of, okay, now I studied at university, I've studied at business school, I have taken a plethora of exams, which some have gone well, some has gone less well. Actually, there were some where I could really remember the information because it was system. For instance, I did a little bit of financial studies as well at the university, which I then transferred into business school. But there I studied some of the very complex parameters of financial systems and micro and macro national economy and financial system and monetary system, all these kind of very, very interesting things, which means I actually have a lot of to say there once I begin working with that level, as well as law in business, as well as business in trade, etc., laws in trade and business, etc. So I have a lot of skill sets to pull on because I've studied a lot. And for instance, when I did the macro financial system, that was based upon mathematics. Not that I am incredibly stupid at mathematics. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's too abstract. There are certain things I can see and envision, and it becomes, once it's a dynamic model, I can work with it. Once it becomes two-dimensional, it kind of, my brain just doesn't work with it. I have to see it holographically, then I completely understand. So it has to have more than just the X and the Y. But if you try to put it into an algorithm or an axiom or a kind of mathematical equation, yes, I can understand equations. Yes, I can completely understand these are models of dynamics, and that's the best way we can do it. But as from there and then go to say that's the truth and that's the sciences and that's the way we can impose on all systems of society, that's kind of where my logical common sense is. Yeah, it's a model we can use in a steady state or a perfect scenario where these dynamics can play in. But reality is a complex system of chaos and order that works in clusters. So therefore, you cannot use these mathematical equations to say that that is exactly how it works, as in kind of when you say, well, thank you, Isaac Newton, for creating the integral mathematics so we can calculate the orbits of the planets and what have you. But perhaps there is more to it. The same with Einstein and his ideas. Perhaps there's more to it. So let us investigate the next level and not get too hooked up and locked down into these specific ideas of how things are, because one person 200 years ago came up with that idea is not the same as it's actual to what really is out there, because of human evolution and the way we learn to interpret systems as systems and not as local interpretation of specific dynamics, which is part of the process. But let us take all the bits and the cut and paste and pull things together or pull things apart as if it were a clock, as we learn in the Cartesian sciences, where everything is kind of soul or matter and they are not intertwined, just to put it that way, and move into systems of all sorts of things, not just when we talk about neurobiology as in kind of seeing as electrochemical processes alone where we become the machine again, but understand that there are more to what a human is, and not going in and say, oh yes, that's the soul. Let us move beyond that as well and say, yeah, there are more to it, which I also work within the transition sciences, where I give my model of the three layers of the lower fields of the human, which we know of as the biofield, the emotional field, the mental field, that are connected to the morphogenetic field, as Rupert Sheldrake talked about, that is behind our DNA. Then we have the emotional field that connects to the electrochemical processes, and we have the central nervous system that are based upon neural network and electric currents and all of these different features that we have, which again, I could at some point probably do a lot of course material of a different type of anatomy that would explain this in holographic principles with the knowledge I actually have from the original ideas of this system and the original architecture behind the outer domain physical vessel that was supposed to be here in the upstart phase after the timeline event, where things began to crystallize and solidify. And by that, we need to create a new type of vessel. So this is the engineering. I could come out and claim the exact same thing as Enki and say, yeah, I have the blueprint for the original human. That's part of my transition science material. So that's not the case, because that's not possible, because we have so many different forms of extraterrestrial DNA. There have been many different lineages in this solar system. So nobody can claim that they have the architecture for the original human. And that's why I think that Enki character comes in and say, oh, I got for the Adama, yeah, the slave blueprint. Yeah, no, thank you. Thumbs down. Okay. So that was another, but again, it goes with when we talk about this hierarchy of information and we go in and say, okay, we need to understand science in a specific way. And why are we working within that way? It's based upon childhood experiences, is based upon our personality matrix, it's based upon the experiences we have had in life, and it is based upon our electrochemical processes of how we have interpreted these experiences, because you can have two twins that have the exact same experience, or as in kind of, yeah, I said typically twins are made of the same DNA, so that's perhaps not the best example. So let's do two siblings with 1 year apart. They're kind of pseudo twins, so they're very close to each other, very close in the same life experience environment of the parents. So therefore, they will more or less raise these two kids up in the same manner, more or less. And we say they're both females, so we don't have any, because the boys are typically handled in one way and females are handled in another way. We know that's kind of a biological imperative. Unfortunately, there has to be put a lot of thought in. That's again the collective subconscious that are ruling us to do things in a specific way, cultural, determined social constructions. We know that. But when we go in and say, well, then we have these two different individuals that are very close to each other, and by that, in all ways and forms, if we do a clinical experiment, would interpret and experience the reality in the same way, and parents would treat them in the same manner because it's the same gender, same environment, same place and time, and onward and so forth. Because we know parents change and they change their experiences. We know, for instance, the first kid is they are parenting in a specific way with the first kid, they're parenting in a specific way with the second kid, and onward. So these two siblings are the first one, so to speak, even though you say, well, one came before the other one. Anyways, put in point of that one is, this is the difficulty of making clinical experiments, right? Because how clinical can it actually get? Because there are always these factors from outside that are always interfering with the experiment. So this is, again, when we talk about scientific experiments, they are artificial constructions that are often to keep up the parameters of scientific evidence-based experimental method. They are often not really in situ. They're not really resembling reality as it actually is, because you have to have all of these things playing in so you can isolate and say, get all the noise away and say, this is actually what we are investigating without it being interfered with anything around it. And you can't do that. It's completely impossible. Anyways, point being is that these two kids, they will have the same environmental surroundings, the same parental mirroring, the way that they are behaving towards the kids, because they're almost at the same age and the same place in the parents' lives, etc., etc. So we kind of have a very similar environment. And yet these two kids will still experience things in a very dissimilar way, because we are not born blank slates, as John Blake told us, that we were born tabula rasa, as in cleared slates, and we were all the products of our parents. There is the third component, and that's who and what we are, and that's our consciousness potentials and our original energy system architecture. Again, I talk about that in the progression sciences, particularly in the 7 classes I've done under the what I call the transition sciences, where I work through my version of the original blueprint of human, the true human, and what we were to use that new type of blueprint for to transform the energy of our system as well as our energy system after the timeline event. So that's a whole other story. So you don't get me on board this whole slaveman kind of thing. It's just when people are talking about that, I'm looking at it from that angle and go into that paradigm and that box, and then I work with the information there. Because that's the way I've taken my process brain and compartmentalized it a little bit by getting it a little bit, actually is a kind of a, these stories. When I went to Australia, I got infusions of reptile genetics for reasons and purposes. And that malified, made my brain a little bit more male. That helped me to put things in boxes. It took away a little bit of the estrogen. It cleared my amygdala a little bit more over to a less fear-based and more adrenal processing, going forward, giving strength, whatever. So anyway, so this compartmentalization has also allowed my brain to work more in similar ways as the male brain does. And the male brain works very much in compartmentalizations within boxes where we then interpret information within that box, whereas the female is kind of all over the place, right? So I'm combining these two things as a way of kickstarting what we could call the different neural networks that are typically associated with the way the male brain works because of the high level reptoid Syrian types of genetics. Whereas the female brain is more oriented to what we call Pleiadian avian types of genetics. And again, there's a reason for this, and that is part of the original engineering where the physicality and the vibrational field are connected to what we typically understand as the female brain and structural layers and electrochemical processes, whereas the mental field and the central nervous system is more connected to the Syrian type of engineering that had the purpose to work with the 5th dimension upwards, whereas the Pleiadian female type of process ways were supposed to work with the 4th cycle or the 4th dimension, if you like. But it's more accurate to say the 4th cycle, and the Syrians were focused on the 5th cycle, trying to undo the effects of the timeline event and what had happened to the civilizations of our solar system. You see, yes, the Mesopotamians, the Anunnaki were here, but they were only working on one locality of our planet. It's again taking that ridiculous ideas that we are all of the Jewish lineage and we are all the children of Christ and what have you, that were part of some of the, what we could say, once the Roman Empire took over the Christian belief system and made it a state religion, and it spread throughout the continent via the Roman Empire, actually, and the trade routes and all the ways that the Roman empires after 44 and upwards had, as it crashed and what have you, but they had traveled around the globe, and these Baal infused humans, which are the root of quite a lot of what we call the quote unquote Western civilization today, have that kind of Baal origin, the Roman origin, what have you. And that goes with specific groups of reptilians. It goes with specific groups of overlords and some of the colonizing races of other sectors and in the 4th dimension and yada, yada. All of this, you can read that in the Souls of Humanity. But going into that understanding, we also understand that as these world religions shifted and they went from the Mesopotamian area and traveled around the globe and into the different sectors via the trade routes that the Roman Empire had made, we had this whole kind of the Hyksos that went more upwards. We have the Scythians, we have the, what we call the Celtic races, and all of these, they spread, they migrated. But we already had the indigenous people, quote unquote, in the different sectors around the planet, and they assimilated and they became members of these families, including when we talk about the Nordic Vikings. We actually had England under our control, quite large sections of England, not entire England, but quite sections, sorry about that, of Britain under our control for almost 100 years, including Oxfordshire, which is interesting because I have this kind of affiliation with Oxfordshire. Why do I have that? Well, interestingly enough, it was actually ruled by one of the tribe kings, one of the Viking kings, for 30 or 100 years or so. And it was interesting thing. These types of history is interesting because we could say what we have learned in primary school and middle school and these kind of things are not accurate. We need to study more as we grow older, so we keep up with the newest levels of science, what they come up with, what they investigate, what they find evidence for, and the new interpretation systems. Because this is also part of the cultural evolutionary journey that we have to do, the scientific evolutionary journey that we have to do. Similar when we talk research within UFO communities, or we talk about the ancient alien theory, the extraterrestrials, why they're here, the ideas of that they have engineered and created humans. Yes, I went with that idea, just pondering upon it, but basically, when I talk about the understanding of the human vessel we have today, it's part of colonization strategy. It's part of taking an original civilization and putting it into a lesser functional physical form that works as an enslavement body. This is the prison suit. Our physical form is the prison suit. So we're not this royalty in our physicality. That's just a low-level piece of crap engineering. Seriously, all of its function is ridiculous primitive. It's an animal body. All religious spiritual teachings talk about that. Even St. Paul talks about that we have been put into this flesh clothing. He actually alludes back to the original the Adama or the Adam and Eve story, where the part of the curse is that they are expelled from the Garden of Eden and they are dressed in skin clothing. Is it actually skin clothing as we're seeing it as a kind of clothes, or is it the body that is the skin clothing made for that as part of the curse? So that's a whole other story. You see, this is not the story of Adam and Eve is not about slaves in the Garden of Eden. Yes, they were to take care of it, but that was actually made as an interesting feature. Anyways, I have ideas of that one. I have the falling angelic on the whole academy where I talk about these kind of things and my understanding, interpretation of the Garden of Eden story, the falling angelics, and they were the first creation of the heavens, and then we had the later creations of the earth. And I talk about that in some of the podcasts that are on the completion of the progressive sciences, which are just 3 podcasts I put in there on my website, the whole Academy website. Anyway, so I can interpret it in all ways and forms. I can make lectures on it, on its own, how the rabbinic literature has interpreted that, how I interpret that. I could put it together with some of the demonology and the angelology and the Kabbalah and put all that in and tap into the thought forms of all the ones that have gone before me and interpreted all of that information different ways and forms, because that's part of the psychic energetic method, that you are capable and able of connecting to the thought forms of the ones that have gone before you, not via the written text, but via the psychic energetic method of connecting to the collective thought forms, the systems of thoughts that are imprinted into our planetary energy fields, which some has called the Akashic records. But as with everything, as we have seen it with Edgar Cayce or whatever, how you pronounce his surname, is that you interpret what you're capable of interpreting. And of course, he was doing it when he was in a trance. So therefore, there was not this frontal lobe, higher systematic processing of the information. He was just talking. The question is, did he actually read the Akashic records, or were he at that short period of time taken over by a deceased that then gave information that was not correct either? Or is it similar to with Dolores Cannon when she was regressing people and she then went into the theta state and there she got connected to with another group of extraterrestrials that used the humans to talk to her? So we don't really know if people are actually reading the Akashic records or they are just being connected to shells or entities or parasites that are actually residing in the human energy system, and all of these things that I also talk about in the class material of the whole Academy courses. So see, when we talk about what I am working with the higher order systemic and both the higher order systemic energetic sciences, which are part of my new website on randygreen.one, and the whole academy where I work with the psychic energetic method and the progression sciences and the original idea of why we're here and what we're supposed to be here. Me diving into the whole Enki story was just because I got a little bit kind of, I would not go on board with that one just to put by saying that one. But when we talk about the way I work with things, it is much, much more broad because I work on a spectrum of all of this information, from sciences to psychic energetic methods, to visions, to encounters, to research, to ufology, to breakaway civilizations, to the origin of humanity, to everything that goes with what it means to be human today, to do the elevation journey and figure out what is that for us and how do we work with this information and how do I remember things? What are the sciences I know of as part of the Pillar Project, the original solar system project that were functional inside this, what we call the outer domain that works in density 1. And what does that mean? And what were we doing here? There were many different colonies. As Alex Collier also pointed out, there have been many different races here. And each and one of them had their own type of physical vessel. So the physical form as we know of it today is a re-engineering that were done 12,000 years ago by the hijackers. There has been many different forms of humans on this, in this solar system that has many different compositions on this planet and other planets before and after the timeline event, before and after the solidification. And we have had different purposes here. So I think it's about time we, as I work with, the idea I work with is the original solar system civilizations. And let us return to our original capacities. And that's the whole academy course. That's what I'm trying with the progression sciences is to teach you. This is the blueprint of who you and what you actually used to be and why you're here, no matter where you come from. And the idea of the regressed genetics and how to activate these and how to clear these out as part of the colonization program and their technologies that they got into our system that then enslaved us, and all the different energy systems and consciousness templates that are lodged into this physical form, because this physical form is not just a slave body. It is an installation body. It is an imprisonment body. It is an enslavement body for some, but that's only the aliens that were brought here from other systems as slaves. Others were brought here as casualties of war. As we saw with Alex Collier, got killed here. There are many different reasons why people are in these physical forms. And that's part of our personal exploration journey to find out locally who and what are we. That's part of the progression sciences as well. And then put it into some kind of new way of thinking with this understanding. How can we use our original capacity into new sciences? That's where I begin to work with the psychic energetic method, as well as the systemic energetic sciences, where we work with the system, our reality field, from that higher angle of perspective and perception and understanding of that we are not alone in the universe. And the personalized understanding of how can we work with the hierarchies of information, the different ways of sciences, and work scientifically with the psychic energetic method included in the scientific method. That's the bridge building work I'm doing. That's my indigo working to build that bridge of literally taking all current day types of sciences and add it in with more dimensions from where we begin to have the multiple understandings of what it actually means to be human. And that, I feel, is the next step for humanity. So we could say, yes, there was all of these ideas with the Adamic template and the slaves and the Anunnaki and what have you, but they're only one group of the colonizers. What about all the rest? The Anunnaki is not even here anymore. Why are we still focusing on that little segment where we are then not seeing everything else? And I think we should more look into it and say that's probably a strategy, getting us focused on something that's not even there, so that we are not seeing all of the other stuff that's going on. And that's part of some of the new reality program sciences that are also put in the systemic energetic website, where I begin to talk about what kind of developmental programs have these different groups of aliens actually done here. When are they working? Because they are working, it's like a timeshare. It's like a fucking timeshare. They are having specific times of the month of specific groups coming in, and they're using whatever they can, not as much our physical form, but our energy system, our template. That's the key. That's what is important here. It's not just this vessel. What is the problem is that we are lodged into that. We are face locked into that form that we're in, and we have difficulty in reaching our full potentials. And again, that's the progression sciences. I teach there how to clear these alien technologies, how to deal with it, how difficult it is, because it's probably one of the worst journeys we'll ever embark on, and how we transform who and what we are to be able to process and work with the holographic sciences that these races are utilizing and are skilled in. So this is a whole new way of being human I'm here advocating for and trying to teach you out there. Because we have had plenty of the ones that are looking into the whole Enki, Anunnaki, blah, blah, blah. There has been generations before us that have done that. Those of us who are starting this now, those of us who are doing this now, yes, research it, get a hold on what others have done, so you are not inventing the deep plate, as we said in Danish, because there have been plenty of people out there already doing their version of something. Look into that so you get the context. And then figure out what is your special contribution to this. How do we progress and our civilization further in to get out of being colonized, of being invaded by new races again, of being tampered with and manipulated and tricked into taking a point where we become the submissive. Let us figure out a way how to get ourselves into the point where we actually begin to have a human government that will have the idea and understanding of how to actually govern this reality field as part of a holographic, very complex universal structure with many different types of civilizations, of which the human civilization in this solar system used to be one of the most advanced of all civilizations. So that is the dare. That is where I want to push this. So even though I started with discussing the Enki thing, the point was not the whole Enki thing. The point was actually the manipulation. And for those of you who missed that point, go back and listen with the ears, that what I want to use that example of Enki and the Adama was not the fact that that is going into the whole Vandanican and Sitkin and Anunnaki and slave humans. The point was actually the manipulation. How are these groups constantly manipulating with us? How are they constantly derailing us from getting to the point? How are they constantly bombarding us with false information so that we don't get to the point in our work where we can connect the dots? It's like when you go into a trial and you have one, you're a lawyer and you're the one that you are defending. You know he or she is not innocent. They are guilty, and you have to defend that person. What is your strategy? Well, first and foremost, you twist the truth so it's not a lie, but it's not the truth. You bend it in a way so that you can convince the jury that that person is a good person, even though that's one of the evilest psychopathic persons on the planet. But that's the strategy. The second strategy is that you bombard the jury with an enormous amount of information so they don't know what's up and what's down. So they get completely confused and not capable of really figuring out and connect the dots. That's the strategy that we're in. They're really trying to bombard us with so much information that we don't know what's right and what's wrong and what's up and what's down. And the only way we can navigate through that is through what I call the true sovereignty. And that is that you stand focused and solidified in your own consciousness structure with your own energy system activated. So you know exactly what is true to your energy system and what is leading to your continued progression and what is manipulating you and holding you back. And if you do learn to work with the higher order psychic energetic method and you understand the dynamics behind the progression sciences, you will be able to detect that. And that's my goal with the whole academy courses and the different pillars I work within and the systemic energetic awareness forum where I begin to work with the different alien groups. But in many ways, I've said everything that needs to be said. Don't trust them. Don't trust any information. Figure out a way to work with information in a proper manner that will rebuild your holographic energy system, because information is not just linear information for the brain. It is actually complex energy systems, complex patterns of information that can upgrade your energy system if you know how to work with information in the correct manner. It's not a brain exercise. It is an energy system rebuilding ability that you have if you learn to work correctly with information. Hence also the Akashic records. Connect to the library of our planet and you will align your energy system with it, which will then begin to ignite some of the original features of your original energy system. And that will eventually then ripple into the physical form. So the problem is not the body itself, piece of crap of engineering, yes, but it can be transformed if you ignite the higher order energy system that is behind the three lower fields. If you put yourself beyond your emotional and mental field, if you put yourself beyond your self-conceptualization of what it means to be human, get out of the factory setting, get out of the protocol and the colonizing programs that have put you into a specific belief system of what you are, and rise above and get back on track on what you really are. All forms of matter can be recreated and engineered and transformed if you work for it. And I know I make it sound simple, but that's the method. The problem is the technologies that are preventing us from doing it. So the problem is not the genetic engineering. The problem is just as much the technology that are upholding this system and this enclosure that we are part of. And that's what the whole academy course is all about. Thank you.